Just a quick content warning. I'm going to be talking about the excessive consumption of alcohol as well as addiction, just in case you might find those topics triggering. So this movie opens with Mads Mikkelsen, who plays Martin, and shows us his somewhat sad family life. His teenage kids are a little disengaged, him and his wife don't appear to be very close, and when he asks her if she thinks that he's boring, she doesn't answer right away. She sits down slowly and kind of sighs, and you get the sense of what's coming. She tells him that he's not the Martin that she used to know, or the Martin that she met. She's in a rush to get to work, but we can see that this wasn't a question in passing for him. It clearly bothers him, and so very early we become aware that he's going through some kind of silent crisis. So Martin goes to his friend Nikolaj's 40th birthday dinner with two other friends, and while three of them indulge in fancy vodka, wine, and caviar, at first Martin sticks to water, and Nikolaj wonders why Martin is being so sensible. He then tells the group about the psychiatrist who claims that humans are born with a blood alcohol content that's 0.05%, too low, and that if you maintained an alcohol level of 0.05%, you would in general be more relaxed and more open. Eventually Martin does have a drink, and then he has this moment where he opens up about his personal struggles. He doesn't really see people, him and his wife are drifting apart, and he doesn't really know how he ended up this way. His friends listen, they console him, and they try to cheer him up, and they actually end up having a great night reminiscing about the good old days. And it's good to see these characters laughing and having fun, because even though it's still really early in the movie, we already feel quite a connection to Martin. Martin decides to try the drinking experiment for a day, and he eventually reports back to his friends, who then decide that they want to test the hypothesis in a more kind of formal way in order to write a psychological essay to test this hypothesis, where they state the aim and their methodology. So basically they want to see if their professional and social performance would be enhanced by maintaining a blood alcohol content of 0.05%. This effort is spearheaded by the psychology expert Nikolaj, and while it seems simultaneously absurd because these are grown men who should know better, it also is oddly compelling and seems kind of sensible, right? Because they have all these rules in place, they have breathalyzers, so it does seem like kind of a controlled experiment, even though you know that it is still a bad idea and there's no way that this can end well. Instantly we see an improvement in Martin's teaching. He's a history teacher, and so the relationship between him and his students does improve. At first he and his students weren't really engaged. They were rather bored, and both students and parents actually complain because they're not really sure they're learning effectively because Martin appeared to be so uninvested. With the alcohol, the kids are laughing, they're learning and inspired, and Martin enjoys giving classes again. Martin feels so good, in fact, that he decides he wants to take things a little further, and Nikolaj agrees that they should go for something even more unreserved, because at this point it's not immediately obvious, at least to the viewer, that the outside world knows that they've been drinking. They question whether or not they might be alcoholics, and they decide on no, because they can still control themselves and they choose when they drink. So they decide to up the ante and drink in order to reach optimal professional and social performance. For a brief period, Martin's drinking seems to have a positive effect on his family life as well. They all go on a canoe trip, something they haven't done in years, and he reconnects with his wife, who admits that she's missed him. We obviously know at this point that things are too good to be true. There's this sense of dread and anxiety because we know that this can't possibly end well, but it is nice to see these characters happy. It's unfortunate, though, that alcohol has a lot to do with it at this point, but I found myself hoping that this would be enough to pull them out of their crisis and realize that they can still find joy in life without it. Because at one point Martin does mention that he feels so good, he even feels good when he's sober. Eventually Nikolaj suggests they test another hypothesis that suggests that if you drink 7 to 10 units of alcohol, you reach the ignition stage where you're either tired and want to go home, or you get restless, and the more you get, the more you'll want. So naturally, Nikolaj suggests that the group starts to drink to this point and beyond. At this point, the viewer gets to breathe a sigh of relief when Martin says that this is where he stops and he wants to go home to spend time with his family. But as he's getting to leave the other three who are making Sazeracs, he's unable to resist the pull of the drinks, which look enticing, and at the last minute, he decides to stay and drink. As the group sets out to reach the maximum blood alcohol content, Nikolaj writes in the report that they will be conducting the experiment in private for safety reasons and to avoid negative social consequences. So this is all taking place in Nikolaj's wife's apartment. Then we see a montage of the men letting go and having a good time, but obviously the more they drink, they decide they want to do more, and they eventually leave the house for the night, which has disastrous consequences. Nikolaj goes home wasted and ends up wetting the marital bed, and his wife and the three kids move to the sister's house. Martin ends up passed out in the driveway of his neighbor's house with a serious head injury, and his sons end up having to help him into the house in front of all of the neighbors. And that's when we find out that they've known for a while that he'd been drinking. This ends in a catastrophic fight between him and his wife. His wife admits that he's been so checked out that she couldn't wait for him and she's been seeing someone else. And Martin's wife, Annika, and his two teenage sons eventually move out of the house. With their lives falling apart, the men decide to drink more, and it looks as though they're starting a race to completely destroy their lives, but they decide to stop the experiment due to negative social effects and the danger of alcoholism. The three men manage to stop drinking, but Tommy, who clearly has a problem at this point, doesn't know how to stop, and he even shows up at the school where they all teach, really drunk. He seems to be in denial about this, but it's also as though there are some moments where he's not even conscious that he's taking a drink. When Martin comes over to check in on him, Martin has to remind Tommy several times not to drink, and we know that he's in serious trouble because the habit has become so ingrained. By the end of the movie, it would seem as though the men would be more wary of alcohol, given that it destroyed all of their lives, and there was this tragedy that occurred. But I won't give away any major spoilers about this. However, we have that glorious scene at the end of the movie, and we just can't tell. And as Mads Mikkelsen said in the interview, you're left wondering whether his character is either flying or falling. This movie has been extremely successful, and especially in Denmark, where 800,000 tickets were sold. Because they have a population of 5.8 million, that means that around 14% of the Danish population has seen this movie. Regarding the experiment itself in the movie, I read an article where Vice spoke to a lecturer of physiology, and he said that the data that was used to arrive at the conclusion of the study was actually very dubious, and it seems that they were using animal data. See, there are certain animals that have alcohol in their bloodstream, such as those that live in Arctic environments, to effectively act as a de-ice. But that's alcohol that they produce themselves, not alcohol that they drink. Maintaining this experiment would put you very close to what Public Health England would describe as alcohol dependent. Of course, it should be pointed out that any level of alcohol is damaging to the human body, and that you start to see negative effects beyond a blood alcohol level of 0.02%. Either way, it was interesting to see this experiment play out in the movie, and while you know that it can't possibly end well and you're just braced for that rock bottom throughout the movie, it has some joyful moments as well, for a movie that's quite melancholic, and I would highly recommend it. By the way, one of the main songs for this movie, the one that plays during the end scene, is so life-affirming. It's called What a Life, and it's by this Danish band called Scarlet Pleasure. I've linked them down below because they're really good and you should check them out. Anyway, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for watching.